I have a ton of friends that are diehard Eagles fans, and they're all annoying. I mean, right? Yeah, obviously,
they're a polarizing fan base.
They are a polarizing
fan
boys. No, I mean, like really good friends, and so all my phone's been blowing up, and just and just if they lose tonight, if my Commanders lose tonight, which
you're gonna hear it.
Oh, I'm not gonna hear it.
That's all right. Well, you get to play them again in a few weeks.
Yeah.
At your house.
At our house. Yes. Yeah. At our house.
Yes.
Where the plumbing actually works.
Raining from the sky.
Yeah.
Oh, they
fixed it. No ownership.
There's been a lot of issues over the years.
Yeah.
I think poop raining from the sky is number one.
Yeah, that was number one. Yeah,
like with a bullet.
For 100%.
Okay.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Happy Friday. Bird up. Bird up, nation.
Let's go, Eagles. Fly, baby, fly.
You want a bird? Here's a bird.
Yep. Hot start.
I got nothing.
Did you get your text?
Yeah. Huh?
Did you get your hate text?
I definitely got some Eagles friends, making fun of me. I may put a dinner bet with one of my buddies on Eagles Commanders, and now I owe my buddy Gary dinner. What are you gonna do?
It's all right.
Well,
it was a bad loss. You heard from the open there, about poop raining down from the ceiling. That's basically what this was, just in football form.
Jake Elliott gave you a chance.
He really did.
A really good
Multiple
chance.
times.
Yeah. I don't know how you didn't get the 2nd and 1 at the end. 3 chances to get a yard.
Yeah, should we just get into this? Yeah, I mean,
sure. Let's jump right into it. We're going to do a lot today, but this is the most important thing we'll do right here.
100% right. Bring it on. I mean, my Commanders did not show up. They are not the better team. Jay, you said I think they cover the 4. I think they kill them. I think they're the better team. You are 100% right. Washington was dominated on both sides of the ball. It was an embarrassing performance because at one point, listen, they have more talent. The Eagles have more talent, but at some point, effort comes into it, honestly, and I just didn't see effort, especially on the line. The offensive line got dominated.
They're overmatched.
The defensive line also struggled as well, but not nearly as much as the offensive line. And you have 2nd and 1. You have to be able to convert that, and they just didn't. They missed blocks. They got just pushed around like rag dolls. And I know a lot of people want to sit here and say Dan Quinn shouldn't have gone for it on 4th down. Kick the field goal, take the lead. 2 things here. I sat with it. At the moment, I kind of had that thought, come on, just kick the field goal, let's go. But first off, number one is that Dan Quinn has been aggressive all year long. Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, they've gone for it on 4th down a number of times throughout the year. So number one, you don't be, and also I think they saw what we were all sawing. We were lucky to be in that game at that point. To your point, Elliott had missed 2 field goals, the extra point. They should have been leading at that point anyway. And our line was just getting, again, dominated. And so I think they sort of felt listen, we haven't stopped them all game. We've been able to sort of slow them down a little bit in the red zone, and then Elliott's missed a couple of field goals, but we haven't stopped them really all game long. And we're getting worn down, physical team on a short week, and we're on the road. We need a touchdown here if we're going to get a shot to win this game. A field goal is not going to do it. There's still a ton of time left in the 4th quarter, and again, Hurts had been driving all game long. So I think it was the right call. You should be able to pick up 2 yards in over 3 downs, and they couldn't.
Yeah. Normally I'm more I'm 100th percentile aggressive, always want the coach to go for it, and usually I think the rule is if it's in question, then you go for it because there's just too much of a natural kind of leaning towards the conservative choice. Someone who needed the Eagles last night, I was happy that Quinn went for that because, one, they'd gotten stuffed on the previous 2 plays, but the main thing for me and the tiebreaker is Jake Elliott was having a nervous breakdown on national streaming service.
Yeah.
And I just felt like someone who needed the Eagles. I didn't think Jalen Hurts was playing that well. I thought Jake Elliott was just a basket case. And I was like, well, Saquon Barkley's going to have to run down and score a touchdown for the Eagles to win this game.
Make them try to kick,
And it just, I don't know. It was a strange game. Strange game from Jayden Daniels. I think the big takeaway of last night is the Eagles' defense just might be a top 5 unit in the NFL. It was just absolutely awesome. No one has made Jayden Daniels look that human all season.
Well, Jalen Carter was dominant at the line of scrimmage. They didn't have an answer for him. It's funny to me, though, every time we talk about, not we, football media as a whole, we talk about was it the right decision to go for it, was it not? But we never criticize the play call.
Yeah. What was that?
Yeah. The play calling, I'm not just on 4th down, which that was weird, but on 3rd down as well. The Eagles didn't have a ton of answers for the short passing game, it felt like, to Jayden Daniels, and they kind of let them off the hook in that regard. I don't have a problem going for it, ultimately, it's always the play calling that I'll blame.
I don't think that's
and
the
Cliff's
play.
been really good.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
I don't think that's the play that cost them the game. Again, like
No.
they're up 13-12. Like, are you saying that you think we shut them down the rest of the way?
No.
I don't know. I don't think they do. Again, their offensive line was just we were worn down. We were worn down defensively. We were worn down offensively. Just they're a better team than us. Like asked and answered. Like, it's demoralizing, on some level, right? I mean, they beat the crap out of us.
But that's the difference of an organization that's had the same people in place that have been building that offensive line and replacing one or two parts each year for more than half a decade versus Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. That this is they're going to build.
First year.
They're going to get that offensive line right. That's the difference right now.
Team 7-4. You still got 2 games against the Cowboys.
They're
You
in
play
a
the
great
Titans,
spot.
Saints, minus 600 to make the playoffs. Just the Eagles are just in a slightly different tier at the moment.
They certainly are. But I thought, I was feeling good about, I was feeling good about it at halftime. I was feeling good about it. I wish I'd taken the under. We talked about that. We talked about that yesterday, but my official bet was Commanders +4, which didn't cash. Your Zach Ertz bet did cash. Jalen Hurts under passing
Lost
attempts.
by half an attempt.
Half an attempt.
While everybody on Twitter was celebrating because they got it at 28.5.
Right.
Obviously, when we tape the show, lines move. That's you make the bet.
Right,
27.5 did not because it was 28.
And I got it at 26.5 because I always take our bets. I always make sure
So it was really nuked by then. By it. It's just fun when you see everybody celebrating your bet that didn't cash.
Yeah.
Good times. Anyway.
Yeah, I was a very depressing loss as well. Kind of a wake-up check. I'll say this about we're sort of all over the place here, but
what else is new?
Jayden Daniels. It was back-to-back bad fantasy performances by Jayden Daniels, and this is the first game where I thought he looked human. He against Pittsburgh he couldn't run, but he still made some unbelievable throws down the field, and a couple of bad drops hurt him in that. He had a couple of misses as well. But this one he just didn't look great, right? I think he made 2 pass attempts to wide receivers. It was all dump offs to Ekeler and short stuff to Ertz. Yep. Terry McLaurin got 1 target, I think.
Yeah, we got to hear from Jayden Daniels after the game, specifically on that. The passing struggles, not really having that connection with Terry McLaurin. Take a listen to this.
Man, we got to execute. We haven't been executing how we were before at the beginning half of the season, so we got to go back and, like I said, look ourselves in the mirror. How can we get better? How can we keep improving? It's a long season, so it's going to be ups and downs, but how can we fight through adversity?
With Terry not being able to target him until the end, did you sense anything they were focusing on, or what was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they had a little plan of, hey, let's limit 17 and stuff like that. So, we got to go back and watch the film and figure out ways how I could get Terry the ball, how we could get Terry the ball, because he's an explosive player, obviously, what he's done in this league and his resume. So we want to give our best players the ball as much as possible. So we'll figure out ways to move down the road and do that.
Terry McLaurin, just 2 targets, catches one of them for 10 yards. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie defensive back for the Eagles, he was phenomenal in this game.
Yeah, Quinyon Island, just all season long he's been doing this, hasn't gotten as much attention. It felt like last night was really his breakout, where just to be he's sticking with Terry McLaurin. He just took him out of the game. He's just shut off one side of the field. And I get that, Jared Verse is the defensive rookie of the year candidate. Jared Verse is awesome. And if he wins the award, it's no travesty whatsoever. But Quinyon Mitchell is the biggest reason, I think, why this Eagles defense went from one of the worst in the league last year to one of the best in the league this year. Every week he's taking the toughest assignment. He's shutting down guys like Jamar Chase, Mike Evans. Terry McLaurin was completely unsighted last night. Even Cliff Kingsbury had to move him over to the other side of the field to get him away from Quinyon Mitchell. Yeah. And so Quinyon, he was the big story out of last night. And the Commanders, in terms of their receiving, I don't know, Matthew, it's Jayden Daniels just not right still with the ribs, because he looked like he was still in a bit of pain, and just the throws weren't coming out right.
I mean, he was also under pressure a ton. Again, the offensive line just got absolutely dominant. You mentioned Jaylen Carter. The entire line, I mean, Carter, it felt like they triple teamed Jaylen Carter, didn't matter. It was just, and it also felt like, and I'm not an offensive line expert, but it also felt like, in addition to being dominated, the offensive line was constantly out of position. They were in the wrong position. They took the wrong angles.
Right.
It just felt like
every plays got blown up, where it's at that point it just feels like the execution is wrong, right? I mean, blown up in the backfield.
Blown up in the backfield, and again on that 4th and 2, yes, there was a bobble, but if you go back and watch that, just the offensive lineman just takes the wrong angle, and Jayden Daniels has to go a lot wider, and that's that allows the guys to come up and make this tackle before he gets there. And just, anyway, very frustrating as well. I think there might be, I think he's probably more hurt than he said, because he's definitely looked
compromised.
He's looked compromised.
These 10 days will do him a world of good.
I think so. Certainly, hopefully, just not being constantly under pressure as well. But like we've said this before, like he's got Terry McLaurin, and that's it. Like Zach Ertz and Austin Ekeler should not be your leading receivers. Like Ekeler had a great game out of the backfield on just a bunch of dump offs. Zach Ertz, revenge game for Zach Ertz. But like, Zach Ertz was out of football. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that, like, credit to Zach Ertz for coming up being still productive in this league. But like, stop throwing to Diami Brown. Like every single week, there's like a bad drop by a Diami Brown. Like, stop throwing to him. Just stop throwing to Diami Brown. You're better off throwing it into the ground because the result's going to be the same. Like it's right. I mean, like it's brutal.
They really need that. Besides
they don't have another guy.
They need the second wide receiver. Like they need like the DeVonta Smith kind of player.
Go sign T. Higgins this offseason or something.
Yeah, which they should. But I'm surprised. Like at the trade deadline, they made the deal for Lattimore, which could have used him last night too. But why didn't they make a deal for
Mike Williams would give them size?
Cortland Sutton. I mean, I know the Broncos are winning, but there were some guys that were out there, right?
Deontay Johnson.
Huh?
Deontay Johnson, who's seemingly just an afterthought already.
They didn't want the tweets.
Exactly. Why don't we send a third for Jonathan Mingo?
Something to think about.
No.
I mean, despite how good the Eagles' front was, though, in fantasy, the running backs for the Commanders were productive. Brian Robinson gets the touchdown on top of 63 yards because he gets volume when he's healthy, which is great to see. And like you said, Matthew, Austin Ekeler was king dump-off in this game. He even dropped one on a third down.
Yeah, that was a bad drop.
Still had a
needed
big
that
night.
one.
Yeah, that was tough, but still ends up with almost 18 fantasy points.
8 for 89 on 9 targets. It's his season high for points in a game in which Brian Robinson was active. Very quietly, he's been fine. Double-digit fantasy points in 8 of 10 games so far this year. He led the team in catches and receiving yards last night. Season high 28% target share. That's not ideal. That's not how they're going to want to use the offense. But Ekeler is still very viable as a flex, especially when you look at Dallas and Tennessee, the next two up for the Commanders. Yeah, I mean, like Brian Robinson was on my hate list. But if you read the write-up, and we talked about this yesterday on the Love Hate Show, like there's always a chance Brian Robinson is going to fall into the end zone, right? They use him when they get in close, and there was certainly the case last night as well. I keep saying very quietly, but whatever. Brian Robinson has double-digit fantasy points in 7 of 8 games this season. He's got 7 rushing touchdowns so far this year. One of my bold predictions at the beginning of the year was double-digit touchdowns for Brian Robinson, that I think he might get to 12. He's at 7, and he's missed a lot of time. Like on a per-game basis, he's well above that pace. Speaking of rushing touchdowns, though, 7th straight game without a rushing touchdown for Jayden Daniels. He had 4 in the first 4 games. 2nd straight game with under 16 fantasy points. He's been under 20 in 4 of the past 5. Do you think, guys, that, and I'll start with you, Connor, has the league figured out? To me, it looks like he's not healthy and the line just got blown up yesterday. I mean, the last 2 playing against T.J. Watt in the Steelers line and then Jaylen Carter in the Eagles line, both guys were just dominant. Both lines were dominant. Is it that, or is it just the league starting to catch up with him and he's starting to hit a bit of a rookie wall?
I think it could be both. I do think he looks physically compromised. Not where he can't be playing, and I think he didn't look that bad. But I think the Commanders were really running a quick passing game that can also widen the field with the running threat of him and the downfield running threat of Robinson. And now when you start to Quinyon was really aggressive against Terry McLaurin last night. Like you saw him in his face at the line of scrimmage. They're taking away more of the quick passing game, which usually leans on Daniels to run. If he's not 100%, the running's not the same. Yeah. This offense needs somebody that can stretch the field, where they can drop back and push the ball vertically, which can push the coverage back a little bit, lighten the boxes. I don't see that guy in this offense. I think they're hoping Diami Brown could do that sometimes. He can't. Eventually, you just don't have the bodies that these other teams have. He can stretch the field.
He's fast.
He is fast, but
he just can't catch it when it gets
to him. He's not threatening. Right, he's not threatening. So that's, to me, besides the offensive line, the number one thing this team needs is a vertical threat that kind of pushes the defense back. Right now, they're getting pressed up on, and they're playing teams with better team speed. Well, the Eagles have team speed. Like, Jayden Daniels isn't going to go run for 50 yards against this Eagles front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that the reality is he's probably a little bit hurt, and he just played the Steelers and Eagles defenses, and that's
Within
probably
10
all there
days.
is to read into it. Thought he looked great against the Giants a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure he's going to look great against the Cowboys, Saints, Titans coming up. So wouldn't worry at all about Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
And even watching the game last night, it just became so clear that, I know that all these guys have pedigree, they're all heavily rated, but I think Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Jayden Daniels, what they give you in terms of the running back run game, it is still kind of underappreciated. There's just so much space for these guys, and every year they have super efficient offenses because of that running threat, drawing a linebacker out of the box.
But that's the problem, right? Is that it wasn't there. It wasn't there against the Steelers, and it really wasn't there against the Eagles. He had 7 rushing attempts for 18 yards, right? I mean, it just felt like anytime. And this was a weird one too. It just felt like the few times that he actually got into space and actually got past the line of scrimmage, it looked like he took the wrong angle a few times.
He hesitated a couple times too.
Yeah,
a couple dump offs that normally he would make, going across the field, just didn't seem entirely
it was
right.
like the duck and run. And again, maybe that's him thinking I don't want to take a hit to my ribs.
Right.
It is more hurt than you think. There was a lot of positives in this game. The problem is just almost none of them were on the Commander's side of the ball. Again, nice game for Zach Ertz, as we always say it. Death taxes, and you start your tight ends against the Eagles. But we start with Saquon Barkley, who's just, number one guy in fantasy football. Ridiculous.
Yeah, the volume is there. He gets 26 carries, but more importantly, the production is there. 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has 52 receiving yards. We heard from Saquon after the game on the Eagles sticking with the run.
We just kept trusting it. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's really what it was. We kept trusting it. We made some checks, and we were just a lot of those runs. We're gonna go back, and we were just one away. Whether it's one block, whether it's one read, and or I might have been a little too tight, or I could have hit it outside. They did a really good job too. I'm gonna give credit where credit needs to be due. Washington came out with a really great game plan, but that's the beauty of football. You could stop us for 20-something carries, but if you rip off 2 long ones when it matters most, the stats look pretty good, and most times you get a win.
Yeah, there's I don't know if there's anything really other to say about Saquon Barkley. He's very good. Great game last night, and could have been better. Got tackled at the 1-yard line, and then they go to the tush push with Jalen Hurts. Literally could have been a 3-touchdown game for Saquon Barkley. He's had now 100 or more yards rushing in 4 of the last 5 games. But what was really nice to see is the 52 yards receiving, again, which is his season high in receiving yards. Saquon Barkley drinks for free at the happy hour.
He picked up the tab for Jake Elliott.
Oh my God, 1,000%. I'll tell you who should be buying Saquon Barkley drinks is Jake Elliott, because if the Eagles lose that game, Jake Elliott can't show his face in Philadelphia. Now all is forgiven. Maybe not all is forgiven, but the sports radio callers in Philadelphia today can have a little less to complain about.
Last night I likened it to Jake Elliott. He was drawn to the wide left like a child when they have a bicycle. They're just drawn to riding into the same tree over and over again. It was like that. I was like, why don't you kick it slightly to the right next time?
The last
Jake's
one he
every
made.
single one.
Yeah.
He snuck it in as well. So all over the place. Seemed to be in his own head, but they get out alive. So one thing about betting is that when you bet on a team, player, or whatever, you just get a much more of an understanding of that player because you focus so intently on them or on that team. And last night, having bet on the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is not playing very well at the moment. And also, Saquon Barkley kind of bailed him out as well. Hurts was better in the second half. Hurts was a disaster in the first half. It just seemed like the one throw he missed, A.J. Brown, where the corner fell over, it just felt like he was also in his own head, not playing really well. And I think the only takeaway from that really is that Saquon is just going to continue to be heavily, heavily leaned on until Hurts kind of finds his rhythm again. Because, people are messaging me, is Jalen Hurts an MVP candidate? What? Jalen Hurts is an MVP candidate. Jalen Hurts has barely been an above-average quarterback this year. Saquon Barkley is that team's MVP candidate. So, look, A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, they don't do a ton. They're going to be better most weeks, but Hurts, outside of throwing these go balls and running, he just hasn't really developed the past 2 years.
Yeah, it's the rushing touchdowns, right?
Yep.
It is the tush push, but that's been a big part of Hurts' game throughout his pro career. It's his 5th straight game with a rushing touchdown. He now has 11 rushing touchdowns this season. No other quarterback has more than 5, and Hurts has 11. Under 20 fantasy points for the first time since week 4, but still 221 passing yards. He gets the 39 rushing yards, and he gets the rushing touchdown. Finishes with 18.7. You'll take that. It was certainly solid. But you're right. The problem with the inconsistent play from Jalen Hurts is that sometimes it will affect the wide receivers. And DeVonta Smith now has a second straight game with under 7 fantasy points. Since week 3, he has only one game with more than 4 receptions. And so he's a little bit more boomer bust this season, again, to your point about both Hurts' inconsistency and also they're getting so much production out of the run game, they don't need to throw as much. Yeah. It's why the undercashed for some people on Jalen Hurts passing attempts.
Well, it's crazy, too, because he did throw a lot in the first half where I was like, I'm not even going to have to track this anymore. And then you get to the fourth quarter, you're like,
he got a shot.
They're not throwing at all. We're back in this. And, cash for some people. For some people, it didn't. Our guy Jonathan that tracks all of our bets, he sent me, he had a parlay. It was like plus 2,200. And he had the Hurts pat. The only leg of 6 that didn't cash was Hurts 27.5. Yep. He had your bet, which was Ertz. He was very in on the Eagles. I was like, we'll get you back, buddy.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, we'll get you back.
I'm glad you didn't take Commanders +4. I'm glad you ignored me on that one as well. They also have 10 days to prepare. I do think better days are ahead for the Eagles offense at the Rams, at Baltimore, home to Carolina. It's not till home to Pittsburgh that you feel worried about it. Again, it's struggling against the runabouts against Baltimore, but you'll be able to throw on them. And obviously, Carolina's Carolina. Not worried about the Rams game that they'll have 10 days to prepare for. So congrats to the Eagles. Congrats to my friend Gary. And, congrats to Jay.
I don't know if that's close enough. All right, let's take a look at the Week 11 injuries we're tracking. And you'll want to keep an eye on these all throughout fantasy football pregame on Sunday morning. Jaylen Warren popped up on the injury report. Guys, Najee Harris off the injury report. He had a full practice. Jaylen Warren on the injury report. Never good when you have a back injury at the end of the week that you didn't have at the beginning of the week.
It's a weird one.
If you're, starting Jaylen Warren, be very cautious with this one. Tank Bigsby with the ankle.
Tyreek Peterson said he is going to practice today, though.
Tyreek Hill he's just going to deal with this wrist injury the whole year, and it could need surgery at the end of the year. Davante Adams with illness and the wrist injury. I think he'll end up playing, but we'll keep an eye on that one against the Colts. Nico Collins is expected to make his return, even though he's been practicing in a limited capacity. T. Higgins with his hamstring injury. T. Higgins often has soft tissue injuries, so kind of just watch it all the way up to game day. Darnell Mooney on the injury report with Achilles. George Kittle dealing with a hamstring. I believe that's back-to-back weeks, though. Kittle has popped up on the injury report with that. Sam LaPorta with that shoulder injury. Dalton Kincaid has not been back at practice leading up to Chiefs week with the knee injury. So if one of those guys could be down, you might want to look to add someone. Here's the top waiver ads right now. Obviously, they meet our threshold, available in over 50% of leagues. Russell Wilson, Grape Slapper, he's QB7 this week because, Matthew, he's got the pass funnel Ravens as we talk about.
Yes, sir.
Bo Nix makes it into the top 10 quarterbacks. He's got the Falcons, and his teammate Audric Estime. This Broncos offense has been better. Estime looks like he's going to carry the workload in the backfield. He's a top 30 play.
I am shocked that Estime is available in over 50% of Yahoo leagues.
A lot of people just didn't realize he got 14 of the, 16 Broncos carries last week?
Yeah, I mean, that's at least 50% of Yahoo leagues that don't listen to Stock Exchange.
Is that right? You got the name right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big
the
step
Pro
for
Baseball
us.
Stock Exchange.
That's a big step for us. Tajay Spears has been eating into Tony Pollard's workload. Jerry Jeudy, of course, just for the volume that he's going to get now.
Jameis Winston, revenge game. Everyone's talking about it.
I have a lot of Browns this weekend, which is a terrifying
what could go wrong?
Oh, you're betting on Myles Garrett more than Jameis
That
Winston.
literally is what I'm doing.
Yeah, so. And QJ, Quentin Johnson, Bengals allow the 4th most yards per game to perimeter wide receivers, which is obviously where Johnson lines up a lot. This is a tougher matchup for Ladd McConkey.
So this is the trade deadline week for a lot of leagues here, guys. And we have 3 candidates to buy, 3 candidates to sell. We start with Malik Nabers.
Yeah, this is in Yahoo leagues and a lot of other leagues as well, but certainly in Yahoo leagues, the trade deadline is, I believe, this Saturday, right? So got a chance to try it and grab some guys a little bit lower. How about Malik Nabers? Right, Giants on a bye this week. Somebody may need somebody this week, so you're like, hey, let me make an offer for Malik Nabers, who leads the NFL with a 30% target share, and 3 of his next 4 opponents, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Baltimore, are bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of most points allowed to opposing wide receivers. So it's an unbelievable schedule coming up for the Giants out of the bye. See Buccaneers, Cowboys, Saints, Ravens. You're not scared about any of those secondaries, to be perfectly honest. And so Malik Nabers, who gets a massive target share and should get a quarterback upgrade. You know, like the expectation
Whoa,
here is
hello.
that you heard me. That Drew Lock starting for the Giants. Now that's not official, but we're expecting that's what's going to happen here.
We're all hoping.
Like that, Drew Lock may not be as accurate as Daniel Jones, but there's a little bit more gunslinger effort. Malik Nabers is down there somewhere, kind of mentality there. I think switching to Drew Lock will help. Wait for it. Unlock Malik Nabers.
Very nice.
Very good, Matthew.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that the Giants. So one thing with wide receivers is that you're always at the mercy, in theory, of a quarterback injury. The two teams where I don't think that really matters that much for completely different reasons are Pittsburgh and the Giants, because Fields is such a good backup, and then for the Giants, I don't think Drew Lock is that much worse than Daniel Jones. You think he's better? So yeah,
I think he's better for Malik Nabers.
Sure. I mean, he'll try to deep more.
He's not going to run like Daniel Jones does either.
Correct.
So there's more passing volume.
And I don't think he's going to dump off to Wan'Dale Robinson as much.
Higher ceiling for Nabers, perhaps, with Lock.
Yeah.
Even if it's chaotic. But that's what you want if you have Giants players right now. Like, you want chaos.
Yeah, 1,000%.
You don't want 140 passing yards.
Yes. No, and I think Drew Lock, there'll be more off-schedule plays, more chaos. And so, and those broken plays are where, like, Malik Nabers running around, and, like, there's only going to be so long that any defender's going to be able to stick with Malik Nabers. And so, on some of those off-schedule plays, like, those broken plays can lead to big fantasy production. I think Malik Nabers is a buy low. I think he is somebody to try to target in trade talks between now and your league's deadline.
Calvin Ridley also on that list there, Jay. I mean, since DeAndre Hopkins has been traded, Calvin Ridley's been really good after he just did nothing for week after week. And it really coincides that Will Levis just looks better right now.
I think that's the key thing is Will Levis, for the first time this year, looked competent and looked like he did last year, where last year the issues with Levis was that he's kind of Drew Lockian, where he's a little bit wild, but he would throw it down the field and would have that beautiful deep ball, and it seemed like he got back to that against the Chargers. So, I mean, Calvin Ridley, the gap between him and the next guy in this offense is just so large. Like, Calvin Ridley has really awoken the past couple of weeks. So, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be shocking at all if Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver 1 the rest of the way.
He's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game since DeAndre Hopkins was traded. I don't know if people are really that aware of that. 36% target share. He's averaging 100 yards. And look at the schedule. 6 of his 8 remaining games are against teams that are bottom 12 in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So just an unbelievable schedule. You look at there on your screen, you've got the Bengals, you've got Colts, you got 2 games against the Jaguars coming up, as well. So my Commanders, who, we'll see if Marshawn Lattimore ever gets out there as well. The Texans have been burned a few times. So, it's a really nice schedule coming up for Calvin Ridley and the Titans.
Our final one, Bucky Irving. 5 of his 7 remaining games are against teams that rank bottom 7 in points per game allowed to running backs. Bucky Irving's gotten more volume as the season's gone on, and the schedule looks great right now, Matthew.
To your point about this, just to put some stats to what you just said in terms of the increased volume, 3 of the past 5 games he's gotten at least 16 touches. He's had a 12% target share over the last 3 weeks, and, again, an upcoming schedule that's just really, really friendly to opposing running backs. 5 of these 7 remaining games are teams that are bottom 7 in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. I mean, look, you sit there. They've got 2 games against the Panthers coming up. They got the Giants out of the bye. They got the Raiders. They got the Cowboys in Week 16 on NBC and Peacock. That game's going to get scheduled out, I have to believe.
Is he going to decide championships in Week 17?
I mean, maybe, right? Tampa Bay, Bucks, Panthers in Week 17. I'd add Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield as well to that list. And then, of course, the Saints in Week 18 for leagues that play that far. But Bucky Irving, who backup producer Pete, I have Bucky Irving in the League of Assholes. Backup producer Pete tried to get him from me.
He's out of control right now.
For Zach Charbonnet.
Of course.
I mean, it's outrageous.
Backup producer Pete, he's sending me follow-up messages about why I haven't replied 3 minutes later to his Roshan Johnson for Tucker Kraft trade offer. It's out of control. The man's got a family.
He's got 3 young children.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 7 shows to produce. Talk about the shows I host. Imagine him producing.
Exactly. Produce a show. Learn your kids' names. Like anything other than bother you about
Roshan Johnson for
Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, and then I spoke to I get Tucker Kraft in the trade. Yeah. He gets Roshan Johnson, and so I spoke to Pete the next day. I was like, "Do you know something about Roshan Johnson?" He's like, No, I don't. I regret the trade already. It's like, what are we even doing here?
Just trading to trade.
Yeah, very, very strange. But with the Bucs, so the Bucs, they're fine. They're like, I'd say they're like a 500 team. When they're fully healthy, they should be a 9-8 team. They've gotten screwed by injuries a little bit. Their last 7 games, they're going to be favored in 6 of them.
Yeah.
The only game they're not going to be favored in is at the Chargers, and it's not like they're going to be like touchdown dogs in that one either. That'll be Chargers -3.5 or something. So just they're going to be in game script a lot. Just the fact they haven't played the Panthers yet in their division is such a boon, getting those 2 games. So yeah, buck up.
I like it. Buck up.
I can kind of
I can get behind that.
I was hoping something clever would pop in my head, but it didn't.
Swashbuckle up. Pirate up.
Let's fire the cannons.
Sword up.
They have a good one.
Cannon up.
Yeah, sure. Cannons up.
Unleash the hounds? No.
No.
Definitely not.
Unleash the ships. Unleash the ships.
Yeah, no one's ever unleashed.
I patch up.
Well, let's see the
that's
trade
more the
targets
Raiders.
to sell.
That would work for the Raiders too.
We'll sell that.
Of course, here are the sell candidates. Najee Harris tops the list. Sorry, Jay. RB17 over the past 4 weeks. The interesting thing with that one is Jaylen Warren with his back injury could mean nothing. It could mean something. But the Steelers do have some pretty tough games ahead, as we also see J.K. Dobbins and Josh Downs on this list. Gus Edwards is back in that Chargers backfield, Matthew. Josh Downs is now back with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, we'll start with Jay's boy, Najee. Look, since Russell Wilson became the starter, he's got a 6% target share. So he's really first and second down only. They're not using him in the passing game as well. And Connor, you alluded to this. His playoff schedule gets really brutal. Look at who he plays in weeks 15 through 17, which is the fantasy playoffs in almost every league. You see it there on your screen. Week 15 at the Eagles. Week 16 at the Ravens. Week 17 home to the Chiefs. That's the Christmas game. Like, that's as bad as it gets. And so I would want to be out of the Najee Harris business if I can get something reasonable for him. It just feels like you're not going to feel good about starting Harris in any of the games in the playoffs. Week 14 is the Browns, and again, I know it hasn't been the season you want for the Browns, but it's not like that defense is a pushover. And especially, by the way, just AFC North, just generally, that's one of those, all the cliches. Throw out the records. These teams hate each other.
It's
true.
It's
true, though.
They play insane football.
They play just angry, mean football.
Yeah. When I think of the AFC North, I think of Kenny Pickett beating Lamar Jackson in games, which seemed to happen. It certainly happened last year. So I think the thing with the Steelers is that they're either going to be underdogs in games the rest of the way, or they're going to go up against great defenses. There's no happy medium. They're definitely going to be underdogs in 5 of the last 8 games, and then home to Cincinnati, they might be the tiniest of favorites there. And just going up against these run defenses is brutal. The easiest games for them are against Myles Garrett and the Browns. It's not great.
Right. And by the way, it's not like he has the backfield to himself. Again, you mentioned if this Jaylen Warren injury turns out to be more serious, but 3 straight games, Jaylen Warren's gotten at least 10 touches. We know Arthur Smith wants to be run heavy, but he's going to split that workload. And listen, if he didn't get a full workload to Bijan Robinson, he definitely ain't giving it to Najee Harris, even though Harris actually does look better this year. I mean, in fairness to Harris, we've had a lot of fun with him over the years, but he looks great this year. Najee Harris looks, but again, schedule, offense, and his role in it just make him a bit of a candidate to sell right now.
A running back dealing with the same exact issue, guys, is J.K. Dobbins, who's been a top 15 running back this season, Jay, but Gus Edwards is back, and no matter what anyone thinks of Gus Edwards, Harbaugh likes him, and he gets work, and he's heavily involved in the run game.
Yep. Dobbins just hasn't been efficient since those first 2 weeks where he was breaking off these huge runs. Those have dried up, and as they have, he was really just dependent on volume and having that backfield entirely to himself. Now with Gus Edwards back, and Gus Edwards ran the ball effectively against the Titans. So J.K. Dobbins, if he's a guy who's only going to get 60-65% of the carries, if that, then all of a sudden he's going to be dependent on those long runs again.
Right. So he's splitting carries, and they're not running nearly as much. Over the past 4 weeks, the Chargers are 7th in pass rate over expected. We've talked about this as Justin Herbert has become a top 10 fantasy quarterback again, right? I mean, this out of the bye, more familiar with Greg Roman's system, and just more comfortable as well as Quentin Johnson gets healthier and gets and Ladd McConkey gets more ingrained as well, and they feel like they found a little something in Will Dissly, deeper tight end. J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, he's a 2-down. He's more or less a 2-down back that's splitting time on a team that isn't as run heavy as it was earlier in the season.
Our last one, Josh Downs. We've talked about this a lot. I mean, since week 4, he's a top 15 wide receiver in points per game. The problem is, Matthew, with Joe Flacco, we've often established there's a floor with Josh Downs that you feel really good about. With Anthony Richardson, that floor seems to be the basement at times. Yes, he could hit the big play, but there's a lot more risk with Downs.
He's had under 6 fantasy points in 2 of the 3 games he's played with Anthony Richardson. Under 6 fantasy points. He's caught 50% of his passes from Anthony Richardson so far this season. And so, yes, do we all wish comeback player of the year Joe Flacco was under center for Josh Downs? We do, but he's not going to be. Also, not a great schedule as you look at it. He's got a bye. This is the fantasy playoffs now. You'll see it there on your screen, like weeks 14 through 16. So a bye on the day, on win and get in week 14, he's not playing. Week 15, he's at the Broncos.
Great secondary.
Right, great secondary. Week 16, he's home to the Titans.
Number 1 pass defense in the NFL.
Yeah. And then, so week 17, he's at the Giants. You like that if you can get there. But, I don't know.
It's a risk.
It's definitely a risk. We don't love the schedule here for Josh Downs. And by the way, if you're just like, well, how am I going to sell him? Well, here's how you sell him, okay? Just clip off this one little piece. Did you know that since week 4, Josh Downs is the 14th best wide receiver in fantasy football on a points per game basis? He's had at least 14 fantasy points in 5 of the last 7 games. Josh Downs is awesome. Okay, now you clip that part, and you don't show him any of the part where we just talked about why you got to get rid of him because of the changing quarterback and the bad schedule and all of that.
You know who tried to get him from me yesterday?
Backup producer Pete.
Close. You know the answer to this. Who is the number 1 Anthony Richardson supporter?
Yeah, Lawrence Jackson. At Lord Don't Lose.
Yeah, I didn't give him the satisfaction.
Yeah,
I already traded him Richardson. I'm not going to trade him Downs.
I would have. I totally would have.
Yeah, the offers weren't great. Understandable.
He doesn't have great players to offer.
Do you think Richardson's going to be better?
Yes, but it's just a matter of how much better.
Because when we last saw him, he was not a functional NFL quarterback.
I think he's going to
2
run.
for 15 around.
I think he's going to run really well against the Jets.
Yeah.
I still worry about the passing efficiency.
Yeah.
I don't think you fix that in season personally.
We saw, nice. I don't want to say it was a full breakout, but we saw a nice game from Adonai Mitchell last week. From A.D. Mitchell. Do you think just in terms of how Richardson has played, that we've seen, he doesn't mind throwing it deep. Do you think his skill set maybe aligns more with Mitchell having some more production down the stretch, or no? Is it all Pittman dependent?
He'll throw it deep to Pierce sometimes. I am excited about Mitchell next year. I don't think it's happening this year as good as things looked last week. I don't think the opportunity will be there. And in this offense, as we often talk about, when Richardson plays, the opportunity is so limited. Yeah. You might be the number 1 guy and get 5 targets, and 2 of them were catchable.
Yep.
So how is Adonai Mitchell going to capitalize on his 2 to 3 targets?
Oh,
yeah, it's definitely a.
But they should see what they have in him. Maybe they do, but they haven't been willing to kind of go that route.
Yeah, it's
been weird.
It feels like coaching-wise, there's been a lot of indecision in Indianapolis. Like, should we go this way? Should we go this? I feel like they're stuck between. You know what? Screw it. We're just playing Richardson, Downs, Mitchell. Like, if you're like, all I care about is next year. I'm worried about developing these players. Mitchell's getting a ton of run. Pierce, Downs, like those 3 young wide receivers plus Taylor and Richardson. That's the future of this franchise. Just get out there, right? But instead, they're flirting with Joe Flacco for a couple of games. Pittman's out there, and obviously I get Pittman. Pittman's not old, but he's more. He's not a young guy either as well. I don't know. These are all the topics that we're talking about, but the mainstream media is not talking about.
That's right.
That's the problem.
And on Fridays, we enlighten you because it's Denny time.
Everyone's so upset about one little Sun player. Yeah. One little time the sun gets in your eyes and one guy drops one pass. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's the end of the world. So you know what? You're so upset about it. You're so upset about a little light. Guess what we're going to do to make the season interesting the rest of the year? We're going to play in total darkness.
I think that's the perfect way to start, keeping the Cowboys season interesting. I'm thinking maybe fans and players will be allowed to bring candles, scented candles, maybe to make the stadium smell good, and also to light up the sidelines. So maybe somebody can see the ball as it's coming to them. Maybe CeeDee Lamb will be able to actually see it for once.
What the mainstream media doesn't want you to know with our friend Denny Carter. Denny, happy Friday. How are you?
Happy Friday to you guys. I hope you have your candles for the next Cowboys game, because I know I do. I'm ready.
Yeah, well, maybe they can be Cowboys-themed candles as well. Maybe you could light one to see, and then you can light another one for Dak's ankle. It's interesting, Denny. I when you came on screen. What?
It's his hamstring. The ankle was broken several years ago and has since healed.
It doesn't matter.
That we know
it's always
of, yes.
It's always something. It's a bunch of fake news. I don't know. Denny will tell you it's actually his ankle. Okay. They want you to the mainstream media wants you to think it's his hamstring, right. But I promise you it's his ankle as well. It's interesting. It looks like you're wearing a denim jacket. When you first came on screen and we saw you, I thought, oh my, is that a white lab coat? Are you an internet doctor?
Another licensed physician on the show.
I have been licensed by a very dark web university, and so I am accredited to give medical information if anybody needs that. But for now, can I tell you a little bit about a Browns receiver that nobody's talking about?
Sure.
Please do, Denny, because I am a man
means.
with too much invested on the Browns this week, and I need every grain of hope I can have right now.
I am too, and it's a little frightening, but what we have here is Elijah Moore. And by the way, listen, I just want to say, I had to go to the deepest, darkest web to find these stats, okay? Because I'm not hearing anything about Elijah Moore. I haven't heard anything about Elijah Moore for 3 years. Yeah. But apparently, the guy has 21 targets over his past 2 games. Only 5 receivers in the entire NFL had more targets from week 8 to 9 than Elijah Moore. The Browns, by the way, are dropping back at a 71% rate since Jameis Winston took over under center for Cleveland. And they're playing a Saints team that's not all that good. They're allowing the 12th most fantasy points to receivers. So I think we might be onto something by getting our Browns in the lineup this week. I think this game could be kind of fun.
The media, of course, is talking about Jameis Winston's return to New Orleans, the revenge game narrative. But you're right. They're completely ignoring the fact that a big part of what Winston's been doing the last 2 weeks is throwing to Elijah Moore, 24% target share in the 2 games since Winston started. And, oh, by the way, pretty good matchup. Saints actually allow the 3rd most yards per game to the slot, which obviously that's where Moore lines up for a lot of his time. I appreciate you doing the digging, going through the dark web, not caring about what kind of cookies and cache are on your computer as you scroll through a lot of sites that honestly I want no part of at all. What else have you found, Denny, as you continue to dig for the readers?
It's part of the job, Matthew, first of all. And if my computer is fried because of it, so be it. It's a worthy sacrifice. Kayshon Boutte, Patriots receiver, looks to be the wide receiver 1. I may have been on this air a few weeks ago saying that Demario Douglas was the wide receiver 1 in New England. That seems to have been wrong. I was misguided, probably by the media. But Boutte has six targets in each of his past 3 games, taking on a Rams secondary that's kind of a mess, allowing the 11th most PPR points per game to opposing receivers. Only the Texans and Ravens, guys, have given up more wide receiver touchdowns than the Rams this year. So I think Kayshon Boutte is kind of sort of interesting this week.
Okay. Denny, I love your aesthetic today. You look like you'd be in a music video for David Bowie, as he's known in some parts around here.
That's always the look I'm going for.
Yes. Aladdin saying Aladdin Denny. What can you tell me, Denny, about Dawson Knox, or Fort Knox, as he's known by me and no one else? What can you tell me about Dawson?
That's right. Yeah, Fort Knox. I call him Fort Knox too. It's you and me, Jay. So Dalton Kincaid doesn't look like he's going to play this week against Kansas City. And it's a great spot for Dawson Knox because the Chiefs are allowing the 3rd most receptions to tight ends. No team has given up more yards to tight ends than Kansas City this season. The Chiefs have the 7th highest pass rate against them this year, and I think the Bills are going to lean hard on the pass here, and this is just going to be checkdowns galore. Let's be honest. Every Josh Allen versus Mahomes game is just these 2 guys checking down over and over and over and over. That's awesome for a guy like Dawson Knox.
Yeah, for sure. I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post cover to cover for the last 2 weeks. No mention of Dawson Knox.
Not a peep.
Not a peep. Not a peep.
Curious.
Kayshon Boutte, nowhere to be found as well. These are the things that the mainstream media is hiding from you as well. I double dog dare a CNN anchor to mention Dawson Knox or Kayshon Boutte this week. It won't happen.
Do it.
No, they won't.
Do it.
No, 1,000%. No,
Denny, that's why you are the hero the people need and the hero people get. For more of Denny's work, make sure to go to NBCSports.com and check out the funnel defense report, as you always hear us talking about pass funnels, run funnels. Denny, we enjoy having you on every Friday. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Denny.
Thanks, fellas.
Good job, Denny. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys, we're taking our first break. When we're back, we preview some of the biggest games coming up this weekend with the highest point totals. What's on tap is coming up next.
Booty, booty, booty.
The Stars are out in Los Angeles for Sunday Night Football when Justin Herbert and the Chargers host Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Tune into NBC and Peacock at 7 p.m. Eastern as we lead you up to kickoff in Southern California. What's on Tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. Let's take it. That's right. Yep, clap it up.
We love Bud Light.
We do. Let's take a look at the matchups with the highest point
I
totals.
wish they'd let me drink it
going into the
more.
weekend. Like for this segment.
For this segment?
Yeah.
For all segments.
Pour a cold Bud Light.
At our 8:30 morning production call, just all of it.
Friday, that's fair game.
Yeah.
All right.
So these are the matchups for the highest point total.
Don't want to get us in trouble here. Let's start with Bengals Chargers because that is the Sunday night game, and it does have a whopper of a total at 48 points. The Chargers are favored in this one, guys, at home by 1.5 points. Matthew, any concerns about Chase Brown in this matchup against the Chargers front that is just totally reformed this year?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, they've been really good. They allow the second fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs, so certainly, you're aware of that. But I think you got to start Chase Brown. He's my running back 11 this week. So I'm as a low-end RB1 in a 12-team league. Look, back-to-back games with at least 22 fantasy points. We know about that. 54 touches in those two games. I think that's the most important thing to hear, including 100% of the Cincinnati Bengals running back touches in that stretch. Maybe Khalil Herbert gets a few more touches because he's been there for a little while now. Maybe he's a little more familiar with the offense. But certainly, when you think about that defensive front for the Chargers, you want somebody that Joe Burrow trusts back there, that knows all the protections, that sort of speaks the same language, if you will. So I think Chase Brown's just going to be out there a ton. And the most important thing is that he's not really game script dependent. Over 60%, basically almost 60% of his points over the last couple of games have come as a receiver. He's got basically an 18% target share. So Chase Brown, my number 12 running back. If you got him, you're starting him on Sunday night.
Yep, DraftKings' scrimmage yards prop is set at 95.5. That's 1 yard lower than Bijan Robinson. Chase Brown.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. Our next game, Seahawks at Niners. The Niners are 6.5-point favorites at home against Seattle. That's hit a bit of a rut lately in the Mike McDonald era. The over-under, more importantly, is at 48 points. Jay, can you start Geno Smith this year against the San Francisco defense that's been tough against quarterbacks the last couple weeks?
I think you can. I just think that the Seahawks have so many weapons that even if it is a tough matchup, look, Geno's going to throw some picks. That's what he tends to do. But his passing prop, 247.5. He's a good chance to throw a couple touchdowns. DK Metcalf looks like he's going to be back. So Geno Smith, not an elite option, but if you have to start Geno and feel terrible about it.
Yeah, I think he's more of a QB2 this week. I agree. Getting DK Metcalf back as well. Obviously, Walker is always a threat out of the backfield. My guy, JSN, had the breakout before the bye. Hopefully, he continues his hot streak here. But it's not a good matchup. Over the last month, Niners allowing only 11.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. That is fourth fewest in the NFL. They allow the second fewest yards per game, per pass attempt, I should say, as well. And then you think back to Week 6 when the Seahawks played this same 49ers defense. Geno Smith had 12.5 fantasy points, right? He's QB 21 that week. And so while I do think, off the bye, 2 weeks to prepare for this game, Geno should be better in this one. I'm not expecting 2 red zone picks again. I do think he can temper expectations here. He's merely a QB2 for me this week, kind of a mid-tier QB2.
Our last game here, Ravens are 3.5-point favorites at Pittsburgh. Over-under for an AFC North game being 48.5. Pretty high point total here.
Give me the under here.
When you got the potential MVP in Lamar Jackson, I guess it does that, and Russ has gotten more out of the Steelers' passing game. But more importantly, Matthew, how much does the return of Isaiah Likely impact Mark Andrews, who finally found his old version of himself the last month or so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's great, right? I mean, so last week, no Isaiah Likely, 22% target share, 94% route participation, both season highs. And it's the only time this entire year that he's had a route participation above 75% and at least a 20% target share. So with Likely there, what it should be, when Mark Andrews has had Isaiah Likely active this year, he's got an under 12% target share. He's only out there in 60% of routes. Now, he's still scored in 3 of the previous 4 games with Likely out there. So he's going to be touchdown dependent. He's a touchdown dependent, lower end tight end. But given that, Ertz and Goddard are just out, and we've got a number of guys like Cade Otton and Trey McBride out this week, I think he's a borderline top 10 tight end for me. So I'm starting Andrews over Likely. I will say that.
That'll do it for What's on Tap, presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Taking our last break. When we're back, it's time for Last Call as Jay and I have our pickup lines, our best bets for the weekend for Matthew. Right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
Yeah, the crown is yours.
Crown's yours.
Oh, the crown is yours.
It's time for Last Call.
Who's the crown? It's yours.
Friday's a doozy. Jay's 4-3. I'm 3-4. These are our pickup lines for Matthew. You've picked Jay 4 times. You've picked me 3, so you're pretty even.
I try to spread the love.
You spread the love.
I do spread the love. I don't like to commit to any one man, any one bet. I like to, I like to play the field, as it were. And, and by the way, and Jonathan, is right? Jonathan's the name of the kid that, God bless this kid, who's keeping track of all of our bets.
He's tracked who you picked.
He tracked who I picked, whether I picked correctly, whether I picked it right or not, whether you guys got it right. Exactly. He's been great. Much more in depth than, our show staff that's just sort of like, I think Barry picked Jay once or twice.
What do you got this week?
Okay, so I'm going with Josh Allen. He invests in your company,
I've heard
right?
of it, Prime Fantasy Life investor
exactly.
Josh Allen.
Just another reason to pick this one. So Josh Allen to have 225-plus passing yards is -130 against the Chiefs. His past 4 weeks, he has gone over this. He's averaging 280 yards per game his past 4 weeks. He goes up against the Chiefs defense that since they lost Jaylen Watson past 3 weeks, they've ranked bottom 6 in terms of dropback EPA, dropback success rate. This has not been a good pass defense without Jaylen Watson. No weather expected in Buffalo. Josh Allen, in a close game, expected he's going to need to be passing. It's a pass funnel defense. The Chiefs have an excellent run defense. I don't think James Cook's going to be successful. 225, just not high enough for Josh Allen.
That is. That's almost shocking, honestly.
All
right, what was the line on that?
They don't have the line up right now, so I've taken the alt of 225 plus.
Okay.
-130.
No, I like it. Matthew, when you hit a cold stretch like I have, I'm 3-4, and I started out quite well. So I've been tanking. You got to just play the hits. Sometimes you play the hits. It's like when the DJ loses the crowd. You throw on a top 10 hit and you just let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Cedric Tillman over 4.5 receptions. 4.5. You know how many targets he has in the last 3 games?
Yeah.
32.
That's a lot.
32 targets. It's Jameis' revenge game against the Saints, who their defense isn't good anymore. Over 4.5 receptions, -120. This isn't an alt line. This is his receptions line. I'm shamelessly playing the hits.
Yeah, and I like that.
Get right, Cedric Tillman.
I'm going with Josh Allen. 225. 225 is too low. It's too low.
You pulled the Lee Corso.
It's Josh Allen. He's the investor in my company. It's too low.
I'm still going to Club
We'll see you
Sed.
Sunday. It's Jay and Connor, Matthew. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Barry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.